Coming to the end of 2015, looking ahead at 2016, and with no active testing going on for Legion, I thought I'd have a look towards the Warcraft movie and some of the locations that are going to be in there. One of the things that people like to do when they really get into a film, of course, when a game comes out, is like to visit various locations where certain events took place. Well, we have the advantage of being able to do that right now. The events taking place in the film, barring change to the storyline, and we know, as I've gone through the trailer again and again, I know there are changes to the storyline as it exists at the moment. We're fine with that. But the locations will still be the same. They may not look exactly the same as they are in game at the moment. Bear in mind, the world has changed a fair bit because of various things. But I've gone through the trailer and gone through and worked out where certain aspects are taking place, and I've just had a little look around there. This video is focusing on locations. You might disagree with some of my choices. Some of them were a bit taking a plump for this rather than being absolutely certain. Some of them I am absolutely certain on. By all means, if you disagree, put comments below. Another thing I would talk about with mentioning characters, though, this isn't really about characters, but I do tend to default to talking about Lane for the Alliance, when in actual fact a number of those may well be Lothar. I'm not going to work out who is who. From the point of view of the actual original lore, Lane wouldn't really be in it a great deal to begin with, because he's not even on the throne. But I think in the film he does play a much bigger part, because I think they're sort of amalgamating two wars into one in the film, is my take on it. So if I refer to Lane and in actual fact it ends up being Lothar, apologies for that, but I'm just defaulting that way because I'm trying to focus on locations and not characters. So the Burning Steppes, this is where the orcs, particularly the Blackrock orcs, end up. And I actually think that this is the sort of camp where you see this scene. So I think we're certainly... Well, I know we're going to see the Burning Steppes because we know that Blackrock Mountain is going to feature, because this pass is where Durotan meets the humans, between Redridge Mountains and the Burning Steppes. And although you can't quite see it from here, of course they're going to change the geography around a little bit, we do see that just behind what I assume to be Lane, King Lane or Prince Lane, it sort of depends on exactly how they do it. As I say, the film seems to be a combination of two wars, really. But you do see Blackrock Mountain behind him, so we know that that's that pass. And it looks, there's very few places with this sort of greyish stone either side that it could be. It's not Deadwind Pass because we can see Blackrock Mountain, as I say. So this in the trailer you see is the meeting between, as I say, Durotan and Lane, and also there's a battle scene here as well. So there's going to be a fair amount of action in this part of the world. Now this image had me thinking for a little bit. There was potentially a few candidates, but given that so much of the action will be taking place around this area, I think this is Redridge Mountains, and I think it's probably round about here. Again, it's not an exact match, but none of them will be. They're not going to keep the geography perfect. The relative positions of the different zones, they will, of course, they'll stick true to that. But yeah, I think we might be talking something around here in Redridge. So the tower we see in this particular scene, I believe, is Karazhan. Now, of course, it doesn't look like this, but then again, Karazhan wouldn't have looked like this back in that day anyway. But I think there's nothing else it can be. Now, Karazhan you would expect to feature in the film. Of course, it is Medivh who opens up the Dark Portal on our side, possessed by the spirit of Sargeras, and in the lore that exists currently in the game, yes, of course, as I've already said, they are going to change bits of the storyline, and but they do sort of discover that it's Medivh who's done this, and this is Medivh's tower, and I believe it's Lothar, but certainly Alliance soldiers come to sort of sack it, you know. so it will feature. It's not, though. It does sort of it gives you a bit of a in the trailer. You sort of see a griffin sort of flying towards this tower, and then you see Lane ascending some steps. I don't think they're the same place. I don't think that is Karazhan. What I think that place is Dalaran. Now, Dalaran at the moment, of course, is in Northrend, Flying City there. But in the film, of course, it wasn't. It was somewhere else. We'll go to that in a moment. But it's quite clearly this. You can see it's a city in the sky. You can see he sort of flies through the clouds. You do sort of see this sort of bottom bit around here, the rock there, the bedrock. And then you fly up and you clearly see these Dalaran type spires. And then the stairs that Lane ascends, again, they're going to remodel it a little bit, aren't they? Of course, part of this was rebuilt anyway after Kil'jaeden did the nasty to it. I think it's up here. I think the place where he goes up and you see those sort of wizardy type characters. I think he's modelled very much on this. And now, of course, we don't see wizards around here who would be stupid enough to hold a council meeting up here. But the general design, I think, matches it very closely. So that is Dalaran. And here we have the location of Dalaran when World of Warcraft went live. Of course, it was in the ground then. Not sure it was flying at that point. I'm trying to think back to Warcraft 3, and if it was flying then, there may have been a flying portion of it. So the scene where Draka is putting little baby Thrall in the Moses basket into the river. Now, where could this be? Well, we can see there's a certain amount of green around it. Puts us in mind of various places. And this is where we know the story is not exactly the same as in the current lore. We know they're going to change things in the film for various reasons, not least of which will be expediency. But this is clearly, I mean, Thrall plays no part in this part of the story at all. They're clearly setting it up for the sequel. And we do know that Thrall, in the original lore, was found by Blackmore. In the original lore, he rescued Thrall. Thrall didn't have to be dumped in a river or anything. But they're choosing to do it like this. But nonetheless, if it's going to be picked up by Blackmore, it needs to be in, well, the Hillsbrad foothills, sorry. So it's very likely to be this river. You've got Durnhold Keep just over here. Of course, now in the game, this is sort of ruins because, you know, Thrall grew up and was broken out of it. And it's got to be pretty much along this stretch somewhere. It can't be much further on down there because that would lead to the sea. There isn't another river from anywhere near Elwynn that leads up to this point. So this is where I think it is. So Hillsbrad Foothills looks like it's going to be included in the film. In this particular scene, I think it's very likely we're looking at Elwynn Forest. And just in game at the moment, I'm flying down the river between Duskwood and Elwynn. We can see mountains in the back here, and we can see sort of mountainous region in the back on the film scene as well. Very, you know, very, very green area, and that's what I think this is. I don't think there's very much doubt about that at all. This scene, of course, is Westfall, no doubt about it, because as eagle-eyed people noticed, you can see the harvesters, the golem harvester, just to the bottom right of Durotan. And also, we know they passed through Westfall when the orcs were actually doing well in terms of the current lore, like the Second War, because one of the places that was taken out by the orcs was Moonbrook, which is just over here in Westfall. So we're going to be taking in a bit of Westfall as well. But this is the scene where in the trailer Durotan says, oh, we need to make our home here. I don't think he meant literally here, but you never know. One place we see a couple of times is Dun Morogh, the only sort of Arctic type landscape, snowy mountainous region that is in this part of Azeroth. So it has to be this. It's not clear exactly how the story is going to run in the film, but in the original lore there were effectively two main parts. there was the part where the orcs originally came out of the dark portal and went rah, and the Alliance just basically ruffle stomps them, completely battered them, and then the orcs sorted themselves out much later and came back for another go and completely swept aside Stormwind and a number of the human lines and drove the humans right up to Lordaeron. So the fighting certainly would have taken in Dun Morogh. And as I say, there is no other location that these scenes could be from. So we know there's going to be some action around here as well. Hopefully no gnomes though. So Stormwind, of course, very clearly looking very different to this, but very clearly Stormwind there, including the harbour. These scenes are likely to be Stormwind Keep. Now, there isn't quite a council chamber in here that looks a lot like this, but there can be no doubt that it is Stormwind Keep rather than Lordaeron. The action does, if you follow the original lore, is likely to shift between Stormwind and Lordaeron, possibly, because in the first war, the first initial incursion, you know, as I say, the orcs are properly smashed, but then they're later on driven towards Lordaeron as the orcs charge through. The reason we say this is we can clearly see the crest of Stormwind on banners all around the room in the film scene there, so I don't think that's Lordaeron. Of course, a certain amount of the action takes place around the Dark Portal. We would know that anyway, but there are scenes that make it quite clear where we can actually see the Dark Portal from our side as well as from the Draenor side. A number of the in the early part of the trailer, the fight scenes in like a forested area are also going to be around here, I believe. Now, you've got to bear in mind, this isn't what it looked like at the time. This has occurred because of events that take place after the invasion of Azeroth. You can see much more that it looks like if you go into the instance, the Black Morass in the Caverns of Time. Then you can see it's much more of a swampy area. But also we can see from the film, as again looks like Lane is flying down on his griffin, and you can see the Dark Portal clearly. Towards a load of orcs. You can see a wooded area over to this side here, so that is where I think that the initial scene where you've got the orcs jumping out the trees and attacking the Alliance soldiers, I think is here. I think that is the initial contact, and when Lane comes along, or is it actually, I haven't really learnt my characters which is Lane and which is Lothar, but I think it's Lane. Comes across and finds the young soldier who was killed, then I think that's all in roughly this area. I say roughly this area, I don't know exactly where. It looks very different now. Of course, this is the Dark Portal from Draenor side. As it looks now, the blasted, the blasted land of Outland. Of course, this is not how it looked at the time leading up to the Salt there. It looked much more like it is now in Tanan Jungle. And this is what it looks like, or it's a bit closer to what it would actually look like before Gul'dan did his silliness with opening up loads and loads of portals. Again, I mean, it's destroyed here, of course, because of the events in Warlords of Draenor. This is not our Draenor, remember, but it would look very similar to this. So these are where the orc camps would have set up around it as they prepared for the assault. And those are what I believe to be the main locations that were taking place in the film, from what we can see in the trailer and from what I know about the general movement of the orcs. As I say, it is quite tricky because this film seems to be taking place in the current lore, what is over quite a long time with a lot of events in it. I have no doubt they're not going to include all of those events. They're going to amalgamate some, push them in together to make for a better narrative for the film itself. Again, apologies with the character thing. I know I'm mixing up Lane and Lothar a lot in this. I just know that they're two principal characters. I know that there'll be times when I've said Lane and it's Lothar. As I said at the start of the film, I've just been defaulting to that because I don't know what they're going to do with that. We know there's going to be changes. This is not going to be a textbook copy of the lore as it currently holds. Just any thoughts about that, dispel immediately. Other thing to bear in mind, as I say, although we can fly around these locations, they won't look like they will in the film. And there's two reasons for that. One, there will be a bit of creative license in the film. Although it looks like they've been pretty good attention to detail, there will be some creative license. We know that. The other thing is, a lot of the structures are not as they were at the time anyway. Stormwind was destroyed by the orcs on their second time through it. So the Stormwind we're in now is the rebuilt Stormwind. Dalaran, I actually said in the video it was Killjoy and it was Archimon, but nonetheless, one of Sargeras's lieutenants got smashed Dalaran up a little bit, so a certain amount of that was rebuilt, and of course it's moved here and there and everywhere. So some of the actual, and even the landscape, of course, with Cataclysm has changed a few things as well. So it won't all look exactly as you would expect it to. But those are what the locations I think they are. If you disagree, then you can put in comments below. Maybe I'll revise my opinion. But until then, and until next summer when we can actually watch the film, I'll see you later.